It's been a minute. Hi, welcome back. If you've been here before, welcome. If you haven't been here before, welcome. I'm Nicole. I like to review the adult content in books because no one else really does. I'm sorry, throughout this entire video you will probably be hearing planes overhead, and that's because I live right next to a military base, and some days are just really busy for planes and some are not. And apparently today we both just got really lucky with the planes. So enjoy that ambiance, I guess. Today's going to be kind of a different one because it's a double header. We're going to just talk about a duology rather than just individual books. As always, I try to keep the spoilers as light as possible. When you're talking about adult content, of course there's going to be light spoilers, that's just part of the game. But I try to keep it vague enough that you don't know who it's happening to and you don't get spoiled plot-wise for it. So I'm gonna give you the adult content warnings right now for both of the books. I'll give you Spin the Dawn first because we're doing the Blood of Stars duology. And then after that, we'll do Unravel the Dusk. All right, so jumping into it. Now, obviously this is a young adult book. I mentioned it before in my Castles in Their Bones video that I've been reading a lot of YA, and that is because that's what my library has a lot of. And it's not necessarily something that I'm happy about because I kind of enjoy stories that are more involved. So sometimes YA pulls their punches on that sort of thing. They don't deliver in that area. So it's a little frustrating, but since I read them, I figured I may as well give you the content, right? So for language, if you were to look at this as an adult book, which I mean, it's young adult, so I mean, it's got more swearing than like you would see in like a PG movie, but as far as books go, I would almost rate this as mild. If it's not mild, then it's a low moderate, right? There's really not a whole lot going on there. Yeah, in the first book, 5 swear words the entire time. Like, that's not too bad for most books, really. For frightening or intense scenes, there was only one scene really that I felt fit into this description, and that was when they described like a battlefield with dead bodies that were like decaying, and it was very disturbing for the character who was witnessing it. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna cautiously put it at moderate, but it is a really low moderate, right? And then I didn't write this in the warning section, but I mean, there's this interaction with a demon, right? And that could be kind of frightening or intense for some people. It wasn't for me, but it could be for you. For violence, this one kind of surprised me. There was this one scene where a man like crushes a person's hand by like stomping on it, I think is what they did. And so like there technically is some violence in this story, you know, that you deal with some people who are dealing with the aftermath of war and things like that. But again, I'm gonna have to put it at like a low moderate because there really wasn't a whole lot of that. For sex and nudity, it's moderate. Yeah, there's some kissing, there's a sex scene or two, but it doesn't go into detail as far as the sex goes. So I'm gonna put it at moderate because I mean, it's pretty run-of-the-mill YA stuff going on. So nothing too intense, nothing too descriptive, you know. I think the most they really describe is just the kissing. And I think, yeah, and I think they describe taking off their clothes, but that's about it. It's not like we're getting lengthy descriptions about body parts and stuff. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. Trigger warning, there is some sexual harassment in the book. It's a character who gets an unwanted advance. It doesn't go into assault or anything like that. Nothing really becomes of it, but there is harassment. So overall thoughts, this book was super fun. Like especially the beginning, a lot of people have said it was kind of like Project Runway meets Mulan, right? And I loved it. I dig it. Amazing. That being said, it definitely takes a turn that you just, like, in the story where you're just kind of like, oh, this is a different book. This isn't going where I thought it was going to, and I don't know how I feel about that. I was just fine with it, but I could see how a lot of people would be like, this isn't what you promised, so why are you giving me something else? And I think that's definitely an issue, but in the first book, it didn't bother me, and I ended the book kind of nervous, but hopeful. I had a lot of hope for the second book. I had no doubts I was gonna buy both books and put them on my shelf. No doubt. And then I read the second book. And I mean, for me, the turns were not like the turns that we took. They were unexpected, but they weren't necessarily a bad thing. I enjoy journey stories. I know that's really fallen out of popularity, but I really enjoy adventures. I enjoy people going on adventures and seeing new things, experiencing new things, and growing in that way. So I was a-okay with it, but it definitely felt a little bit out of place. So Unravel the Dusk. Again, the language was pretty much, I would say, low moderate, if not mild. I mean, we get, goodness, only like a handful. I think less than 5 swear words in this one. Really, not much at all. For frightening or intense scenes, again, it's a low moderate. The series really stayed the same overall. And the most frightening or intense thing that I found was, there was this threat to end a bloodline. And, when you threaten to end a bloodline, that means I will kill all men, women, and children that are living from this bloodline. So, it's kind of an intense threat, right? For violence, again, it's gonna be a moderate, because there's only really one scene that I would list as violent. It's funny because there are fights and battles and wars and stuff, but it's so weird. You can have those things, but not really go into the violence aspect of it, which is such a funny thing to say. But that's what happens in this book. So there are only a couple of violent scenes within this book, and I'm going to talk about one of them here. I'm going to talk about one of them later. One is much more disturbing than the other. So the one that I'm going to talk about now is the lesser of the two. And that's some dude straight up gets melted like Indiana Jones style. You know what I mean? Like, how they open the Ark of the Covenant and like, woo! Yeah, that's what you get. And that's the noise they made. Woo! Ooh. Oh, goodness. For sex and nudity, I didn't actually write anything down, and I don't know if that's because there wasn't anything or if that's just because I forgot. I don't think there was. I don't think that there was really any sex or nudity in this book. If there was, it didn't go any further than the previous book. So if, you were comfortable with where the sex and nudity was at the previous book, you'll be fine with this one. If they do have sex, I want to say it required very few lines. It was like, and then they went to bed together. And you're just like, oh, okay. I guess things might have happened. Or not, who knows? Okay, going back to the violence thing, right? The one thing that made me decide, okay, I'm gonna put this as moderate instead of mild, and this is also kind of a trigger warning, there's violence against women. So All of these women are kind of brought in and they're servants, and they are being punished and hurt in order to break a character's will. It's that method that people use in stories, or I guess you could use it in real life too, but I hope you aren't. Anyway, so it's this idea that you won't talk or you won't do the thing that I want you to do, so I am going to break you. I'm going to do things that force your hand. And so you have these women that are being beaten, they're being whipped, they're being starved, they get their bones broken, and it's surprisingly disturbing given how lighthearted or how eased back the story is most of the time. I feel like for the most part the story really doesn't go too deep into that sort of thing, so it was kind of, it felt out of the blue in a way. Now, getting into my overall thoughts of the book, I would say, so this book falls into an interesting category, right? I have very mixed feelings when it comes to books that have a lot of hopelessness in them. When a book feels hopeless, it's so difficult for an author to do it well in a way that keeps me engaged and keeps me wanting to read. Because if you are, like for me, if a character is just too, like their circumstances are too overwhelming, too depressing, or just hopeless, like I said, then like it bums me out and I don't want to keep reading. And I don't know if I'm the only person who feels that way, but it's a real problem that I have. And actually, so I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it's one of the funny things with Brandon Sanderson, right? A lot of people really love his character work and how he is not afraid to delve deep into, we're going to break this character down as far as we can so we can watch them rise up again, right? And, you know, he's got a character in Warbreaker where that happens. He's got a character in Mistborn where that happens, or the Mistborn series where that happens. He's got a character, he probably has multiple characters in Stormlight Archive where that happens. And it's funny because every time we go down that road, I have a really hard time working through it. It's an instant turnoff for me. And Unravel the Dusk had that. Like the entire book just felt like, I don't know how you're gonna get out of this. Like, this is such a mess. The entire world is just poof, it's just going up in flames, right? And on top of that, it felt like so many of the plot points did not mesh. They did not sync and, you know, go flow smoothly one to the next. It felt very much like these plot points happened because they had to happen. We were forcing the story to go from beat to beat, right? And it really didn't jive with me. I was not into it. And continuing on that train of thought of that this series felt really disjointed and it was kind of, the story was forced. Similarly, I feel like we didn't earn the ending. I think that's one of the key differences with someone like Sanderson is he breaks down his characters and he makes them work. He makes them fight and bleed and earn their ending. This ending wasn't earned, it was handed to us. And it's a no from me, dog. I had really high hopes, but it just didn't pan out. And I'm really bummed about it, but I mean, what can you do? So I recommend the first book. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I really loved the competition aspect of it. But again, if you're going to enjoy this series, what you need to keep in mind is that what you're kind of promised up front isn't what you get throughout the series. It takes a lot of turns that you can't really expect or predict. It's not like that. So it could be very frustrating for you. But, you know, let's end on a happy note because I like ending on happy notes. Can we just talk about the cover? Come on. I wish I had the book with me so I could hold it up and I could like fling it around and and be extra about it, but I can't because it's back at the library where it belongs. But I love, one, I love the UK covers. I think they're gorgeous. But two, I also really love how her arm is up in the drawing, right? She's got her scissors and stuff, and there's like a hawk behind her, right? And I love that the wing follows the curve of her arm and makes it look like she has wings. Like, that artist deserves every single coin she gets because that cover is stunning. Stunning. I digress. Either way, if you decide to pick up these books, I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear, you know, if anyone else feels the same way about me about depressing storylines. Because, like, no one ever talks about that. They always talk about, I love the representation with depression, but nobody talks about what a big bummer it is while you're reading it. Like, boo. Anyway, if you decide to pick it up, I hope you enjoy it. Love to hear your thoughts. And as always, whatever you're picking up, happy reading.